March 3rd, 1952, 2:17 a.m. Captain Michael Brennan's hands wouldn't stop shaking as he stared at the brown envelope sitting on his kitchen table. Inside was 12,000 in crisp $100 bills, money that wasn't meant for him, money that belonged to Albert Anastasia, the man they called the Lord High Executioner of Murder Incorporated. Brennan had been a cop for 19 years. He'd worked his way up from beat cop in Hell's Kitchen to captain of the 14th Precinct in Manhattan. He had a reputation, not a good one, but a useful one. He was the kind of cop the mob could work with, the kind who looked the other way for the right price. For 7 years, Brennan had been on Anastasia's payroll, $500 a month to ignore certain activities in his precinct. Illegal gambling operations, loan sharking, the occasional body that needed to disappear from a crime scene before homicide arrived. It wasn't much by mob standards, but it was enough to pay for his daughter's private school, enough to keep his wife in the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to, enough to make him feel like he was getting ahead instead of drowning. But tonight, everything had changed. The envelope was supposed to be delivered by Johnny Rao, one of Anastasia's regular bagmen. Johnny made the rounds every month, dropping off payments to cops, judges, union officials, anyone on the payroll. Tonight, Johnny was supposed to meet Brennan at their usual spot, the back corner of McCarthy's Bar on 9th Avenue at 1:30 a.m. Brennan had arrived on time. He'd ordered his usual scotch, waited at the bar, checking his watch every few minutes. By 2 a.m., Johnny still hadn't shown. That's when Brennan noticed the brown envelope sitting on the bar next to where he'd been sitting. Someone had left it there while he was in the bathroom. No note, no explanation, just the envelope. Brennan had assumed it was his usual $500. He'd grabbed it, left a $5 bill for the bartender, and walked out. It wasn't until he got home and opened the envelope that he realized his mistake. $12,000. $2,400 bills wrapped in a piece of paper with 3 words written on it, for the judge. Brennan knew exactly what this was. Albert Anastasia had a criminal trial starting next week. Assault charges from a waterfront dispute where Anastasia had personally beaten a union organizer nearly to death. The judge was William Hartley, a federal judge with a reputation for being tough on organized crime. But every man has a price, and apparently Judge Hartley's price was $12,000. The money wasn't meant for Brennan. It was meant for whoever was supposed to deliver it to Hartley. And by taking it, by having it in his possession right now, Brennan had just committed the most dangerous mistake of his life. Because if Anastasia found out that his bribe money had ended up in the wrong hands, if he thought for even 1 second that Brennan had stolen from him, there wouldn't be an investigation or a trial. There would just be a body, probably found in pieces across 3 different boroughs. Brennan poured himself a scotch with shaking hands. He had maybe 12 hours before someone realized the money never reached Judge Hartley. Maybe less. He needed to think. He needed a plan. His first instinct was to return the money, call up Anastasia's people, explain the mix-up, apologize profusely. But would they believe him? Or would they assume he'd tried to steal it and only returned it because he got scared? His second thought was to run. Take the $12,000, add it to the $8,000 he had saved up, grab his wife and daughter, and disappear. Change his name, move to California or Florida, start over. But Anastasia had people everywhere. The mob had eyes in every city, connections in every police department. Running would just delay the inevitable. Brennan sat at his kitchen table until dawn, staring at that envelope, trying to find a way out of the trap he'd accidentally walked into. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that there was no mix-up at all. The envelope had been left for him exactly as planned, and Albert Anastasia knew exactly where his money was. To understand what happened to Captain Michael Brennan, you need to understand who Albert Anastasia was in 1952. He wasn't just another mobster. He was one of the most feared men in the American underworld, a man whose reputation was built on a simple principle. If you crossed him, you died. And usually, you died badly. Anastasia had started as a longshoreman on the Brooklyn docks in the 1920s. By the 1930s, he'd become the operational chief of Murder Incorporated, the enforcement arm of the National Crime Syndicate. Conservative estimates put his personal body count at over 60 men. Some investigators believed the real number was closer to 200. By 1952, Anastasia controlled the Brooklyn waterfront, ran gambling operations across New York, and had his hands in labor unions, construction, and legitimate businesses. He was powerful, wealthy, and absolutely ruthless. But he had a problem, and that problem's name was Vito Genovese. Genovese was Anastasia's rival in the Luciano crime family. Both men wanted control of the family. Both men had ambitions to become boss of bosses. And both men knew that eventually, one would have to destroy the other. Genovese was playing a long game. He couldn't kill Anastasia directly. Anastasia was too powerful, too connected, had too many loyal soldiers. A direct hit would start a war that Genovese might not win. No, Genovese needed to weaken Anastasia first, isolate him, turn his allies against him, make him vulnerable. That's where Captain Michael Brennan came in. 6 weeks earlier, February 1952, Genovese had called a meeting with one of his most trusted associates, a man named Anthony Strollo, known on the streets as Tony Bender. Strollo was a problem solver, the kind of man who specialized in creating situations that looked like accidents or coincidences. Anastasia has a trial coming up, Genovese said, lighting a cigar in his social club in Greenwich Village. Assault charges. He's bribing Judge Hartley, $12,000 to make the charges disappear. I heard, Strollo replied. Johnny Rao's making the delivery. Genovese smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Johnny's going to get sick that night. Food poisoning, maybe. Something that keeps him home. And the money's going to end up somewhere else. Where? In the hands of Captain Michael Brennan, one of Anastasia's pet cops. Brennan's going to find that envelope at McCarthy's bar, and he's going to take it home thinking it's his monthly payment. Strollo understood immediately. And when the money doesn't reach the judge, Anastasia's going to think Brennan stole it, Genovese finished. He's going to think one of his own people, a cop he's been paying for 7 years, tried to rob him of $12,000. Anastasia will kill him. Exactly. And when a police captain on the mob payroll turns up dead, what happens? Strollo nodded slowly. Police investigation, federal investigation. Every cop Anastasia has on his payroll gets scrutinized. His whole protection network falls apart. And while Anastasia's dealing with that mess, while the feds are crawling up his ass, while his operations are exposed, he's weak, vulnerable, distracted. It was elegant in its simplicity. Genovese wouldn't kill Anastasia directly. He'd just create the circumstances that would destroy Anastasia's power base, isolate him from his protection, and make him an easy target when the time came. The plan was set in motion with precision. On March the 2nd, Johnny Rao ate dinner at a restaurant that Genovese's people controlled. Something in the veal scalloping gave him violent food poisoning. By 10 p.m., Johnny was in his bathroom, too sick to make his rounds. Rao called Anastasia's office, explained the situation. Anastasia was annoyed but not concerned. Who's covering your route tonight? Tony Bender said he'd handle the important deliveries personally, Rao said between bouts of vomiting. The judge's package, the union guy, the thing with the construction permits. Anastasia trusted Strollo. They'd worked together for years. Fine. Tell him I want confirmation when each package is delivered. That night, Strollo made his rounds. He delivered packages to the union official, to the construction inspector, to everyone on Johnny Rao's list, everyone except Judge Hartley. That envelope he left on the bar at McCarthy's, right where Captain Brennan would sit, right where Brennan would find it, and assume it was his monthly payment. The next morning, March 3rd, Judge William Hartley called Anastasia's lawyer. Where's my consideration for this case? The trial starts in 4 days. If I don't have assurances by tomorrow, I'm proceeding with the full prosecution. Anastasia's lawyer immediately called Anastasia. The judge says he never received the package. Anastasia was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice that made his lawyer's blood run cold, he said 2 words. Find it. Within 2 hours, Anastasia's people had talked to Johnny Rao, confirmed that Strollo had made the deliveries, talked to Strollo, who swore he'd left the envelope at McCarthy's bar exactly as planned, right on the bar where Judge Hartley's contact always sat. But then the bartender at McCarthy's remembered something. There was only one guy at the bar last night during those hours. Captain Brennan, that cop from the 14th. He sat right there, had a scotch, went to the bathroom. When he came back, he grabbed something off the bar and left. The pieces fell into place in Anastasia's mind. Brennan had taken the envelope. Whether by mistake or on purpose didn't matter. What mattered was that $12,000 meant for a federal judge was now in the hands of a cop, and if that cop got caught with that money, or if he talked about where it came from, Anastasia's entire operation was at risk. Anastasia made a phone call. "I need you to pick up Captain Brennan. Bring him to me, tonight." March 3rd, 1952, 6:35 p.m. Captain Michael Brennan was driving home from the precinct, his mind still racing with the impossible situation he'd found himself in. The $12,000 was still sitting on his kitchen table where he'd left it that morning. He'd spent the entire day trying to figure out what to do. He'd considered every option. Returning the money seemed safest. But how? He couldn't just walk into Anastasia's headquarters with an envelope full of cash and claim it was all a misunderstanding. He couldn't call and explain, not over police phone lines that might be monitored. He couldn't send it through an intermediary because that person would know he'd had the money, and that knowledge made them a liability. Running still seemed impossible. Anastasia's reach was too long, his memory too permanent. Men who stole from Albert Anastasia didn't get to retire. To Florida. They got buried in landfills. Brennan was so lost in thought that he almost didn't notice the black Chrysler that had been following him for the last 6 blocks. Almost. 19 years as a cop had given him instincts, and those instincts were screaming now. He watched the rearview mirror. The Chrysler stayed 3 cars back, matching his speed, turning when he turned. Professional tail, the kind that didn't care if you noticed because by the time you did, it was too late. Brennan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This was it. Anastasia had figured it out. The question now was whether they wanted to talk to him or kill him. With Anastasia, you never knew until it was happening. He thought about running the red light ahead, trying to lose the tail in traffic. But that would just confirm his guilt, make him look like he was trying to escape. And you couldn't outrun the mob in a 1949 Chevrolet sedan. The light turned red. Brennan stopped. The Chrysler pulled up, beside him in the next lane. Brennan didn't look over. He kept his eyes forward, hands visible on the steering wheel, trying to appear calm even as his heart hammered against his ribs. The passenger window of the Chrysler rolled down. A man Brennan didn't recognize looked over at him. "Captain Brennan, Mr. Anastasia would like a word. Pull over at the next corner and get in our car. Don't make this difficult." Before Brennan could respond, the light turned green and both cars moved forward. The Chrysler stayed beside him, herding him toward the curb. Brennan's mind raced. Getting in that car meant disappearing. It meant ending up in the trunk, in the river, in a shallow grave. Once he got in that car, he was done. But what choice did he have? If he refused, they'd drag him out at the next light. If he tried to drive to the precinct, they'd follow him there, wait until he left, grab him somewhere else. You couldn't hide from Anastasia's people. They'd get him tonight or tomorrow or next week. But they'd get him. Brennan pulled over. The Chrysler stopped behind him. 2 men got out, both wearing dark suits, both moving with the casual confidence of men who'd done this many times before. One opened Brennan's door. "Let's go, Captain. Mr. Anastasia doesn't like to be kept waiting." Brennan got out of his car on shaking legs. As he walked toward the Chrysler, he noticed a woman across the street watching. She looked away quickly. Nobody wanted to be a witness to mob business. They put him in the back seat between 2 men. The interior smelled like cigarettes and cologne. Nobody spoke as the car pulled back into traffic. They drove through Manhattan, heading toward Brooklyn, toward the waterfront, toward Anastasia's territory. Brennan had been a dirty cop for 7 years, but he'd never been on this side of the transaction. He'd never been the problem that needed to be solved. And now, sitting in this car with 4 of Anastasia's men, he understood what it felt. Like to be completely powerless, to know that your life was in someone else's hands and there wasn't a damn thing you could do about it. After 25 minutes, the car pulled into a warehouse district near the Red Hook docks. The building they stopped in front of looked abandoned, but Brennan knew better. This was where Anastasia conducted business he didn't want recorded, business that required privacy and soundproofing. They walked him inside. The warehouse was empty except for a table, 3 chairs, and a single hanging light bulb. Albert Anastasia sat at the table, perfectly still, perfectly calm. He was a compact man, maybe 5'7", but his presence filled the entire warehouse. He looked at Brennan the way you'd look at a bug you were deciding whether to crush. "Captain Brennan," Anastasia said quietly. "Sit down." Brennan sat. His legs wouldn't have supported him much longer anyway. Anastasia didn't speak immediately. He just looked at Brennan, let the silence build, let the fear work its way through every nerve in Brennan's body. Finally, after what felt like an hour but was probably only 2 minutes, Anastasia spoke. "You have something that belongs to me." Brennan's mouth was dry. "Mr. Anastasia, I can explain." "Can you?" Anastasia's voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You can explain how 12,000 meant for a federal judge ended up in your pocket. You can explain how you thought you could steal from me and I wouldn't notice." "I didn't steal it," Brennan said, his voice cracking. "I swear to God I didn't know what it was. I thought it was my monthly payment. It was sitting on the bar where I always sit. I just picked it up and left. I didn't open it until I got home." "And when you saw it was $12,000 instead of $500, what did you think?" "I thought there'd been a mistake. I was going to return it. I just didn't know how. I didn't want to call because the phones might be monitored. I couldn't come to you directly. Because I didn't know if you'd believe me. I've been trying all day to figure out how to get the money back to you safely." Anastasia studied him. Where's the money now?" "My kitchen table, all of it. I haven't spent a penny. I haven't told anyone. I was going to figure out a way to get it back to you tonight." "You expect me to believe that?" "It's the truth." Anastasia stood up, walked slowly around the table until he was standing behind Brennan's chair. Brennan felt cold sweat running down his back. This was it. This was how it ended, in a warehouse in Red Hook, shot in the back of the head for a crime he didn't commit. But then Anastasia did something Brennan didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh or a friendly laugh. It was the laugh of a man who just understood a joke that nobody else had seen yet. "You're telling the truth," Anastasia said. "I can see it in your eyes. You're too scared to lie. You really did think it was your monthly payment." "Yes," Brennan said, relief flooding through him. "Yes, exactly. Which means someone set you up. Someone wanted me to think you stole from me." And in that moment, sitting in that warehouse, Brennan understood that he'd been a pawn in someone else's game. Someone had used him to get to Anastasia, had put that envelope exactly where he'd find it, had created a situation designed to make Anastasia kill one of his own people. The question was, who? Anastasia walked back to his chair and sat down. His expression had changed. The cold fury was still there, but now it was directed at someone else, someone who'd tried to manipulate him, tried to use one of his own people against him. "Tony Bender delivered the packages that night," Anastasia said, more to himself than to Brennan. "Johnny Rao got food poisoning, very convenient food poisoning." Brennan said nothing. He was still trying to process the fact that he might actually survive this night. "Vito Genovese," Anastasia continued. "This has his fingerprints all over it. He wanted me to kill you. He wanted the heat that would bring. He wanted my police protection to fall apart right before this trial." Anastasia was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he looked at Brennan. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home. You're going to bring me that $12,000 tomorrow morning. You're going to deliver it to Judge Hartley personally, as if nothing happened, and you're never going to speak of this night to anyone. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Brennan said. "Absolutely. And Captain, from now on you work directly for me. No more intermediaries. You report to me personally. Because if Genovese tried to use you once, he'll try again. And next time, I need to know about it immediately." "Of course, Mr. Anastasia." Anastasia nodded to his men. "Take him home." As Brennan walked back to the car, his legs barely functioning, his entire body shaking with relief and residual fear, one of Anastasia's men leaned close to him. "You're one lucky son of a bitch, Captain. Most guys who sit in that chair don't walk out." Brennan nodded. He didn't trust himself to speak. They drove him back to his car in Manhattan. Before he got out, the man in the passenger seat turned to him. "Boss wants you to know something. That thing with Johnny Rao's food poisoning? Johnny didn't eat at his usual restaurant that night. He ate at a place owned by Genovese's people. Boss wanted you to understand how close this came to going wrong for everybody." The message was clear. Anastasia knew exactly what had happened, knew exactly who was responsible, and was going to handle it his own way. Brennan's role in this was over. The next morning, March 4th, Captain Michael Brennan delivered a brown envelope containing $12,000 to Judge William Hartley's clerk. The trial went forward as scheduled. The assault charges against Albert Anastasia were dismissed due to lack of evidence and witness cooperation issues. Judge Hartley announced his retirement 3 months later, citing health concerns. Tony Bender disappeared in April 1952. His body was never found, but everyone in the New York underworld knew what had happened. Anastasia had sent a message about what happens to people who try to manipulate him. Johnny Rao suddenly developed serious health problems and moved to Arizona for the dry climate. He lived there quietly for another 30 years, never returning to New York. Captain Michael Brennan continued working for Albert Anastasia for another 5 years. He made sergeant, then lieutenant, then captain again in a different precinct. He retired in 1957 with a full pension and moved to New Jersey. He never spoke about that night in the warehouse, not to his wife, not to his daughter, not to anyone. Vito Genovese eventually got what he wanted, but not through schemes and setups. In October 1957, Albert Anastasia was assassinated while getting a shave at the Park Sheraton Hotel barbershop in Naughty, Manhattan. The hit was sanctioned by multiple families who'd grown tired of Anastasia's violent unpredictability. Genovese became one of the most powerful mob bosses in America. But that night in March 1952, in a warehouse in Red Hook, Albert Anastasia had proven something important. You couldn't manipulate him with elaborate schemes. You couldn't turn his people against him by planting evidence and creating misunderstandings. Because Anastasia understood something that Genovese had underestimated. Fear was a tool, but so was clarity. When Anastasia looked at Captain Michael Brennan that night, he didn't see a thief. He saw a scared cop who'd stumbled into something beyond his understanding. And instead of killing him reflexively, Anastasia had taken the time to understand what really happened, to see the manipulation for what it was, and to turn a potential disaster into useful information about who his real enemies were. Captain Brennan spent the rest of his life knowing that he'd sat in that chair, in that warehouse, with Albert Anastasia standing behind him, and somehow walked out alive. Not because of anything he'd done, but because for once, a man known as the Lord High Executioner had chosen to think instead of kill. That brown envelope with $12,000 inside had been meant to destroy Anastasia's network and weaken his power. Instead, it revealed Genovese's tactics, eliminated a traitor, and turned a corrupt cop into a loyal asset. The scheme had failed completely. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do isn't pulling a trigger. It's assuming you know how someone else will react. Vito Genovese had assumed Anastasia would kill first and ask questions later. He was wrong. And that miscalculation cost him 5 more years of waiting before he finally got the power he wanted. As for the $12,000, it reached Judge Hartley exactly 1 day late. The judge accepted it without comment, dismissed the charges, and everyone moved on as if nothing had happened. Because in 1952 New York, that's how the world worked. Money bought outcomes, power protected itself, and the truth was whatever the most dangerous man in the room said it was. And on that night, in that warehouse, Albert Anastasia was the most dangerous man in any room he entered.